My name is Isabella Hayes, and I am 34 years old, standing outside the gates of Fort Sam Houston on what should have been a proud day. I felt my heart twist in ways I thought I had learned to ignore. My brother Jason was being honored inside that military base, receiving an award from the Department of Defense, and somehow, despite traveling thousands of miles to be there, I found myself once again on the outside looking in. The security guard was checking the guest list while my family sat in the car behind me, and I could already feel the familiar sting of being forgotten. But what none of them knew, not my parents, not Jason, not anyone in that vehicle, was that I carried a secret that would change everything in the next hour. Before I tell you what happened that day, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please hit the like button and subscribe to hear how everything unfolded. Because what happened next, my family never saw it coming. I need to take you back to understand how we got here. Back to a childhood in Houston, Texas, where my brother Jason and I grew up in a modest home on Maple Street. Our father worked as an engineer for an oil company, spending long hours at the office, while our mother taught third grade at the elementary school 3 blocks from our house. Jason, being 4 years older than me, naturally became the golden child, the one who carried all our parents' dreams on his shoulders. When he graduated from Rice University with a full scholarship, our parents threw a party that filled our entire backyard with neighbors, colleagues, and relatives who flew in from 3 different states. There was a banner, a cake with his face on it, and speeches that went on until the sun set. When I graduated from the University of Texas 4 years later, with a higher GPA than Jason ever achieved, we had dinner at Olive Garden, just the 4 of us. No banner, no speeches. Just breadsticks, and my mother saying, "That's wonderful, sweetheart," before launching into a story about how Jason had just made junior partner at his law firm. I remember sitting there twirling pasta on my fork, realizing that no matter what I accomplished, I would always be the footnote in our family's story. Jason was the main character, and I was simply the supporting cast. The inequality was not malicious. My parents were not cruel people. They simply had blind spots the size of Texas when it came to recognizing that they had 2 children, not one. Every soccer game Jason played, both parents attended with coolers full of snacks and cameras ready. When I ran track in high school and broke the school record for the 800-meter dash, my mother had a parent-teacher conference she could not miss, and my father had a meeting that ran late. I stood on that podium alone, holding my medal, scanning the crowd for familiar faces that were not there. By the time I turned 19, I had made a decision that would define the rest of my life. I was going to prove my worth not by competing with Jason in his world, but by carving out my own path entirely. I started researching the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, reading everything I could about what it meant to serve in the United States Navy. The more I learned, the more certain I became. This was how I would make my mark, how I would become someone my family could not ignore. When I told them at dinner one evening, the reaction was exactly what I expected. My father put down his fork and stared at me like I had announced I was joining a circus. "Isabella, that is not a path for women," he said, his voice carrying that tone he used when he thought he was being protective, but was actually being dismissive. My mother worried about the danger about me being so far from home, about whether I was really cut out for something so demanding. And Jason, sitting across from me with that smirk he had perfected over the years, actually laughed. "You will not last a week in military training," he said, reaching for more mashed potatoes. "You have never been the type to handle that kind of discipline." His words lit a fire in me that night. I applied to the Naval Academy the next day, pouring every ounce of determination into my application essays. When my acceptance letter arrived 6 months later, I did not tell anyone right away. I just held that envelope in my hands, reading and rereading the words, "Congratulations, you have been selected." For the first time in my life, I had something that was entirely mine, an achievement that had nothing to do with being Jason's little sister. The 4 years at Annapolis were the hardest and most transformative of my life. While my classmates talked to their families every week, sharing their struggles and triumphs, I found myself calling home less and less. The conversations, when they happened, always circled back to Jason. He had bought a new house. He had won a big case. He had gotten engaged to Amanda, a woman from a prominent Dallas family. My own milestones, making the dean's list, being selected for a prestigious summer training program, leading my class in navigation exercises, were met with polite acknowledgement before the subject changed. My graduation from the Naval Academy should have been one of the proudest moments of my life. I stood there in my dress whites, surrounded by families who had flown in from around the country to watch their children become officers. My parents did not come. They called the week before to say they had already committed to attending a charity gala that Jason was organizing. "We are so sorry, honey," my mother said over the phone, "but you understand this is important for your brother's career. We will celebrate with you when you come home." I never went home after that graduation. I received my commission, my assignment, and I threw myself into my naval career with everything I had. Over the next 15 years, I climbed ranks faster than most people thought possible. I deployed to the Mediterranean, to the Persian Gulf, to the Western Pacific. I led sailors through dangerous waters, made decisions that saved lives, and earned the respect of admirals and generals who had been in uniform longer than I had been alive. Every promotion, every medal, every commendation I earned through sweat sacrifice and an unwavering commitment to excellence. And through it all, my family remained blissfully unaware of what I was doing. I tried in the beginning to share my life with them. When I made lieutenant, I called home excited to tell them. My mother answered, listened for maybe 30 seconds, then said, "That is wonderful, dear. Listen, I have to run. We are throwing a birthday party for Jason this weekend, and I still have so much to prepare." Click. When I was selected to serve in Afghanistan, a deployment that would put me in active combat zones, I wrote a long email explaining where I was going and what it meant. No one replied. 6 months later, when I returned, the only message waiting for me was a group text with photos from Jason's vacation in Tuscany. The breaking point, or what should have been the breaking point, came when I was 29. Our unit was providing security for a diplomatic convoy when we were ambushed. The explosion threw me 15 feet, and I woke up 3 days later in a military hospital in Germany with a concussion, 2 broken ribs, and shrapnel wounds across my left side. I spent 3 months recovering 3 months of painful physical therapy of nightmares that made me afraid to close my eyes of wondering if I would ever feel whole again. I did not call my family during that time. I knew they would not understand, would not know what to say, would somehow make it about how stressed they were about Jason's upcoming trial, or how busy they were planning his anniversary party. Instead, I healed alone. I relied on my fellow sailors, on the nurses who checked on me every 4 hours, on the therapists who helped me rebuild my strength. And when I finally walked out of that hospital, I made a promise to myself. I would never again seek validation from people who had shown me repeatedly that I did not matter to them. My worth was not determined by whether my parents displayed my achievements on their mantle or whether Jason acknowledged my existence. I was a naval officer, and that was enough. But despite that promise, despite all my efforts to build a life separate from my family, there was still a small part of me that hoped. Hope that one day they would see me, really see me, not as an afterthought, but as someone valuable in my own right. That hope was what brought me to Texas on this particular weekend, standing outside Fort Sam Houston, about to walk into a situation that would finally force my family to confront who I had become. The email from my mother arrived on a Tuesday, while I was aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln somewhere in the Western Pacific Ocean. My role as the commander of Carrier Strike Group 3 meant that my days were filled with briefings, tactical decisions, and the constant responsibility of overseeing thousands of sailors and billions of dollars worth of military assets. But when I saw my mother's name in my inbox, I clicked on it immediately, that old instinct to hope flickering to life, despite my best efforts to extinguish it. The email was brief, almost businesslike in its tone. "Isabella, I wanted to let you know that Jason will be receiving the Outstanding Defense Attorney of the Year award next month. The ceremony will be held at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio. The award is being presented by the Department of Defense for his work on several high-profile military cases. This is a very important day for our family. We are all very proud. The ceremony is on the 15th at 10 in the morning." That was it. No personal greeting beyond my name. No questions about how I was doing or where I was in the world. No direct invitation, just an information dump about Jason's latest achievement. I sat in my small cabin, the gentle rock of the ship beneath me, reading that email over and over. Each time I hoped to find something more between the lines, some hidden message that said my mother actually wanted me there, that she was thinking of me as more than just a name to check off on a notification list. But there was nothing, just the facts about Jason delivered in the same tone she might use to announce a dental appointment. The logical part of me, the part that had survived and thrived in one of the most demanding careers in the world, told me to delete the email and move on. What was the point of flying thousands of miles to attend an event where I would once again be relegated to the shadows? While everyone celebrated Jason, I had learned to live without their approval. I had built a life that mattered, that made a difference, that gave me purpose and pride. Why would I voluntarily walk back into a dynamic that had caused me so much pain? But there was another part of me, smaller and more fragile, that whispered different advice. This was a military ceremony. For once, I would be on familiar ground, surrounded by people who understood the world I inhabited. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the bridge I had been looking for, a way to finally connect with my family, in a space where my own experiences were relevant. And beneath all the rationalizations, there was a simpler truth. Despite everything, I still loved them. I still remember Jason teaching me to ride a bike when I was 6, running behind me with his hand on the seat, promising he would not let go until I was ready. I still remembered my mother braiding my hair before school, her fingers gentle and sure. I still remembered my father reading bedtime stories in funny voices that made me giggle until my stomach hurt. Those memories felt like they belonged to different people, to a different family that existed before comparisons and competitions, and disappointment became our normal language. But they were real, and they mattered. And they were the reason I found myself requesting leave, booking a flight from Honolulu to San Antonio, and packing a simple dress that would help me blend into the background of Jason's big day. I did not tell my family I was coming. Part of that decision was practical. I genuinely was not certain I would be able to get away until the last minute, given the operational demands of my position. But the larger truth was that I wanted to see how they would react if I simply showed up. Would they be happy to see me? Would they make room for me literally and figuratively? Or would my presence be treated as an inconvenience, an unexpected complication to their carefully planned celebration? The flight from Hawaii to Texas was long, giving me too much time to think, to question my decision, to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. I watched movies without really seeing them, picked at the airline food, without tasting it, and tried to convince myself that I was making the right choice. When we finally landed in San Antonio, I collected my small suitcase and took a taxi to my parents' house in the suburbs, a house I had not visited in over 3 years. It was early evening when I knocked on the door. Through the window I could see lights on, could hear the murmur of voices and laughter. My mother opened the door, and for a moment we just looked at each other. She was older than I remembered, more gray in her hair, more lines around her eyes. "Isabella," she said, her voice carrying surprise, but not necessarily pleasure. "You did not tell us you were coming." There was no hug, no excited exclamation, just that flat statement of fact. "I wanted to surprise you," I said, trying to keep my voice light, trying not to show how much her lukewarm reception already stung. She stepped aside to let me in, and I walked into the living room where my father sat in his recliner reading glasses, perched on his nose as he scrolled through his tablet. Jason and his wife Amanda were on the couch, and they both looked up as I entered. Jason's expression went through several rapid changes: surprise, confusion, then settling into that familiar condescension. "Wow," he said, standing up, but making no move to approach me. "You actually found time in your busy schedule to join us." The sarcasm in his voice was sharp enough to cut. Amanda, whom I had met only twice before, at Jason's wedding, and at one awkward Christmas dinner, gave me a once-over that made me feel like I was being appraised and found wanting. She was impeccably dressed in designer clothes, her makeup perfect, her posture radiating the confidence of someone who had never questioned their place in the world. My father finally acknowledged my presence with a brief nod. "Isabella, good to see you." That was it. No, "How was your flight?" No, "We have missed you." Just a polite acknowledgement, the kind you might give to a distant acquaintance who unexpectedly showed up at your door. I stood there in the entryway, suitcase in hand, feeling like an intruder, in what had once been my home. The evening did not improve. Dinner was an exercise in endurance, with conversation revolving entirely around Jason's upcoming ceremony. My mother talked about the outfit she had bought for the occasion. My father discussed the important people who would be in attendance. Amanda showed me unsolicited the professional photos they had taken for the press release. And Jason held court discussing his cases, his strategies, his triumphs with the ease of someone who had never doubted that he was the most interesting person in any room. I tried once or twice to contribute to the conversation. When they talked about the ceremony being at Fort Sam Houston, I mentioned that it was one of the largest military medical centers in the country. My father grunted in acknowledgement and turned back to Jason. When Amanda complained about having to go through military security, I started to explain that the procedures were standard and necessary, but she talked over me, directing her complaints to my mother instead. By the time dessert was served, I had stopped trying. I just sat there eating my pie, wondering why I had thought this time would be different. That night, I lay in my childhood bedroom, now converted into a guest room with all traces of my existence, carefully removed and questioned every decision that had led me to this moment. Through the wall, I could hear my parents talking in their room, their voices a soft murmur punctuated by occasional laughter. They were probably discussing the ceremony, going over the schedule, anticipating the moment when their son would be recognized and celebrated. It never occurred to them to knock on my door to ask if I was comfortable to sit down and really talk to me for the first time in years. I was there physically present, but somehow still invisible. Morning came too quickly. I woke to the sound of activity in the house, footsteps in the hallway, the shower running, my mother's voice calling out instructions about what time we needed to leave. I got dressed slowly, carefully, choosing a simple navy dress that I had brought specifically because it would not draw attention. The dress was modest, appropriate, forgettable. I did not style my hair in any particular way, just pulled it back into a simple bun. I wore minimal makeup. Everything about my appearance was designed to help me fade into the background, to be the dutiful daughter who showed up but did not make waves. When I emerged from the bedroom, the rest of my family was already gathered in the living room, and the contrast between my appearance and theirs could not have been more stark. My mother wore a stunning emerald dress with matching heels and jewelry that caught the light with every movement. My father had put on his best suit, probably the same one he wore to important business meetings. Amanda looked like she had stepped out of a fashion magazine in a cream-colored ensemble that probably cost more than my monthly salary. And Jason, of course, was impeccable in a tailored charcoal suit that emphasized his success and status. No one commented on how I looked. No one said, "You look nice," or even, "Is that what you are wearing?" I was simply there, acknowledged with brief glances, before the conversation resumed about logistics and timing. My mother checked her purse for the third time, making sure she had the tickets to the ceremony. My father jangled his car keys impatiently. Amanda took several selfies, adjusting the angle until she found one she deemed suitable for her social media followers. The drive to Fort Sam Houston took about 20 minutes through morning traffic. My father drove my mother in the passenger seat beside him. Jason and Amanda occupied the middle row of our father's SUV, sitting close together, Amanda's hand resting possessively on Jason's knee. And I sat alone in the very back, wedged between suitcases that had not been removed from the last family trip I had not been invited to join. The seating arrangement felt metaphorical, a perfect representation of my place in this family structure. The conversation during the drive centered entirely on Jason and what to expect at the ceremony. "The general who will be presenting your award is Matthew Thornton," my father said, his voice filled with an excitement I rarely heard directed at anything related to me. "He is the Deputy Commander of Naval Special Warfare Command. Very influential. This could open a lot of doors for you, son." "We need to make sure we get good photos," my mother added. "Amanda, you have your camera ready, right? This is the kind of thing we will want to remember forever." Amanda assured her that she had not only her camera, but also a portable charger because she planned to take hundreds of photos to document every moment of Jason's triumph. I stared out the window, watching San Antonio pass by, thinking about all the ceremonies I had attended over the years, where I had been the one being recognized. There was the ceremony when I received the Bronze Star for my actions during a rescue operation in the Gulf of Aden. There was the day I was promoted to captain, standing in front of my peers and superiors, who praised my leadership and dedication. There was the moment I learned I had been selected for Admiral, an achievement that placed me among an elite group of officers. My family had not been present for any of those moments, and it had never occurred to them to ask if such moments existed in my life. As we approached the gates of Fort Sam Houston, I felt my stomach tighten with a familiar anxiety. Military bases had become my home over the years, places where I moved with confidence and authority, where I was respected, and my expertise was valued. But entering this particular base in this particular context, as part of Jason's entourage, rather than on my own credentials, felt wrong in ways I could not fully articulate. The security checkpoint appeared ahead, and my father slowed the car, rolling down his window to speak with the guard on duty. The young soldier, who could not have been more than 20 years old, stood at attention, his uniform crisp, his bearing professional. "Good morning, sir," he said. "Welcome to Fort Sam Houston. May I see your identification and ceremony credentials?" My father handed over his driver's license along with a printed email that served as their invitation. The guard examined the documents carefully, then picked up a clipboard with what I assumed was the official guest list. He ran his finger down the page, nodding as he found the names he was looking for. Mr. David Hayes, Mrs. Patricia Hayes, Mr. Jason Hayes, Mrs. Amanda Hayes. He read aloud, making check marks next to each name. Then he looked up, his eyes scanning the interior of the car, and his expression shifted to confusion. "Sir, I show 4 people on your guest list, but there are 5 people in your vehicle." His gaze landed on me sitting in the back. "Ma'am, may I see your identification?" The silence that followed was excruciating. I could feel my family's discomfort, their collective realization that they had not thought to add me to the guest list because it had never occurred to them that I would actually show up. Jason turned in his seat, and the look on his face was a mixture of annoyance and embarrassment. Then he laughed, that condescending laugh I knew so well. "Oh, that is just my sister. She is not on the list. She is just, tagging along." The guard looked uncertain, clearly trying to figure out how to handle this situation diplomatically. "Sir, I apologize, but if she is not on the approved guest list, I cannot allow her entry without proper authorization. Security protocols require advance notification for all attendees." "She is not even important enough to be on the list," Jason said, his voice carrying clearly in the confined space of the car. He was not trying to be quiet about it, was not attempting to spare my feelings. If anything, he seemed to find the situation amusing. Amanda giggled beside him, covering her mouth with her hand, but not quite hiding her smile. My father sighed, frustrated. "Isabella, this is complicated. Maybe you should just get out." I finished for him, my voice flat. "You want me to get out of the car?" My mother turned in her seat, her expression pained, but not enough to actually advocate for me. "Honey, you understand, right? This is Jason's day. We do not want to cause a scene or delay anything. Maybe you could wait somewhere nearby and we will catch up with you after." I felt something inside me crack. Not break, because things had been breaking for years, small fractures that I had learned to ignore or repair. But this was different. This was the final undeniable confirmation that to my family, I was not worth the minor inconvenience of a few extra minutes at a security gate. I was not worth standing up for, not worth advocating for, not worth the briefest defense. I reached for the door handle, ready to do what I had always done, to make myself smaller, to remove myself from the situation, to spare my family any discomfort that my presence might cause. But just as my fingers closed around the handle, something happened that changed the trajectory of the entire day. Another military vehicle pulled up behind us, and I heard a door open and close. Footsteps approached our car, and a voice commanding and authoritative called out, "Is there a problem here?" I looked out the rear window and felt my heart skip. It was Major Richards, someone I had worked with during a joint operation 2 years ago. He was walking toward the security checkpoint, and when his eyes met mine through the car window, I saw recognition flash across his face. His eyes widened slightly, then dropped to what I was wearing: civilian clothes, sitting in the back of a family car like a forgotten piece of luggage. The young guard turned to salute the major. "Sir, we have a guest who is not on the approved list. I was just explaining the security protocols." Major Richards looked from the guard to our car, his gaze lingering on me for a long moment. I could see the question in his eyes, the confusion about why I was in this position. I gave him the slightest shake of my head, a silent plea. Not yet. Not like this. He hesitated, clearly torn, between following protocol and responding to what he obviously perceived as an unusual situation. "Let them proceed," he finally said to the guard. "I will take responsibility for the additional guest." The guard looked relieved to have the decision taken out of his hands. He waved us through, and my father accelerated into the base without another word to me, without any acknowledgement of what had just happened, without any recognition that his daughter had just been publicly humiliated because she was not important enough to remember when creating a guest list. The auditorium where the ceremony was being held was impressive. A large hall with rows of seats facing a stage decorated with American flags and military insignia. The space could easily accommodate several hundred people, and it was already filling up with attendees in a mix of military uniforms and civilian formal wear. Officers mingled with lawyers, politicians, and defense contractors, all there to witness the recognition of outstanding attorneys who had served the military legal community. An usher directed us toward a section near the front, marked with a small sign reading, "Hayes Family." There was a row of 4 seats positioned to give an excellent view of the stage where Jason would soon stand to receive his award. 4 seats, not 5. The message could not have been clearer if it had been written in neon lights. Jason sat down first, Amanda beside him. Then my parents filled the remaining 2 seats. I stood at the end of the row, my presence suddenly and completely awkward. Other families were settling into their designated areas, excited conversations filling the air, cameras being readied, but our little section was marked by uncomfortable silence. "I guess they did not account for extra guests," my mother said quietly, not quite looking at me. She was trying to smooth over the situation without actually addressing it, a skill she had perfected over decades of pretending everything was fine in our family. Jason turned to look at me, and there was something in his expression that went beyond simple thoughtlessness. It was triumph, a vindication of his worldview, that he was the important one, the successful one, the one who mattered. "The ushers might be able to find you a seat somewhere in the back," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the rear of the auditorium. "I am sure there are some empty spots once everyone gets settled." Amanda leaned into him, whispering something that made him smile. I could not hear the words, but I could imagine them, some comment about how awkward this was, how typical it was for me to create complications, how I had never quite fit into the polished image they wanted to project. She looked at me, then her eyes traveling over my simple dress, my minimal jewelry, my unassuming appearance, and I could see her judgment as clearly as if she had spoken it aloud. In her mind, I was exactly where I deserved to be, standing in the aisle, while the real family sat in the spotlight. I felt my throat tighten, felt the familiar sting of tears threatening to form. All those years, all those deployments, all those nights, I had lain awake wondering if my family ever thought about me, ever missed me, ever wished I was there. And here I was, present in the flesh, and I might as well have been invisible. Worse than invisible. I was an inconvenience, a problem to be solved by relegating me to the back of the room, where I would not interfere with their perfect family portrait. "I will just go," I heard myself say, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. This was a mistake. I turned to leave, to walk back down that aisle and out of the auditorium, out of the base, out of their lives in any meaningful way. I would go back to my ship, to my crew, to the people who actually valued what I brought to the world. I would stop trying to win approval from people who had decided long ago that I was not worth approving of. But I had taken only 3 steps when the doors at the back of the auditorium opened and a commotion began to ripple through the crowd. Heads turned, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Someone near the entrance called out, "Attention!" And the entire room stood in unison, bodies straightening, hands moving in salute for those in uniform. I turned to see what was happening, and my heart stopped. Walking through those doors flanked by aides and security was General Matthew Thornton himself. He was exactly as I remembered from the briefings I had attended, tall and commanding, his uniform decorated with enough ribbons and medals to tell the story of a distinguished career spent in service to his country. But it was not his appearance that made my breath catch. It was the fact that his eyes were scanning the room with clear purpose, searching for something, searching for someone. And then his gaze found me standing alone in the aisle, and his stern expression softened into something like relief. He changed direction, his entourage adjusting course to follow him, and he walked directly toward where I stood. The crowd parted automatically, everyone giving way to the senior officer's determined path. Behind me, I heard Jason make a small sound of excitement. "He is coming over here," he whispered to Amanda. "Oh my God, he is coming to greet us before the ceremony even starts." My father stood a little straighter. My mother smoothed her dress. They were all preparing for what they assumed would be a moment of pre-ceremony acknowledgement, a brief hello from the general to the family of one of the attorneys being honored. They had no idea what was actually about to happen. General Thornton stopped directly in front of me, so close that I could see the silver eagles on his uniform, could read the name tape that confirmed his identity. Then, in front of hundreds of witnesses, in front of my family, who had never seen me as anything more than Jason's unremarkable sister, General Matthew Thornton, came to attention and rendered a sharp, perfect salute. "Admiral Hayes," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the suddenly silent auditorium. "It is an honor to have you here, ma'am. We were not certain you would be able to join us given your operational schedule." Time seemed to stop. I heard my mother gasp, heard my father choke on whatever he had been about to say, heard Amanda whisper, "What?" in a voice filled with confused disbelief. But mostly I heard nothing at all, just a ringing silence, as an entire room full of military professionals and civilian guests processed what the general had just said. Admiral Hayes. He had called me Admiral Hayes. I returned General Thornton's salute with the automatic precision of years of training, even though I was in civilian clothes, even though my mind was reeling. "General Thornton, sir, thank you for accommodating my late arrival." He lowered his salute and extended his hand, which I shook. "Nonsense, Admiral. Your presence honors this ceremony. I apologize for the confusion at the gate. If I had known you were attending as a family member rather than in official capacity, I would have ensured proper arrangements were made." He glanced past me to where my family stood frozen in various states of shock. "I see you have been waiting in the aisle. This will not do. Please follow me." He turned and gestured toward the front row, the very first row of seats directly in front of the stage, the row reserved for VIPs, for generals and colonels, and other senior officers. "Your seat is here, ma'am, front row as befits your rank and your service." I opened my mouth to protest, to say I should sit with my family, but the words died in my throat. Because when I glanced back at them, at their pale faces and wide eyes at Jason, whose hand was gripping the seat in front of him so tightly, his knuckles had gone white, I realized something. For the first time in my entire life, they were seeing me, really seeing me, not as the shadow of Jason's success, not as the daughter who had never quite measured up, but as someone who commanded respect from one of the highest-ranking officers in the United States military. "Thank you, sir," I heard myself say. I would be honored. I followed General Thornton to the front row, aware of every eye in that auditorium tracking my movement. The seats he indicated were among other senior officers: a rear admiral I recognized from joint operations briefings, 2 Marine colonels, and a Navy captain, who stood as I approached and offered a respectful nod. These were my peers, my colleagues, people who understood the weight of command and the sacrifices it demanded. As I sat down, I allowed myself one glance back toward where my family remained standing in their row 4 rows behind me. My mother had tears streaming down her face. My father stood like a statue, his mouth slightly open, his eyes locked on me with an expression I had never seen before. Amanda had sat down abruptly as if her legs had given out. And Jason, my successful, accomplished, celebrated brother Jason, stood with his hands shaking visibly, his face drained of color, staring at me like I was a stranger he was seeing for the first time. The ceremony was about to begin, and everything had changed. The master of ceremonies, a colonel with an impressive array of medals across his chest, stepped up to the podium as the room settled into expectant silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, honored recipients, please take your seats. We are about to begin this morning's ceremony." There was a rustling as people complied chairs, creaking, fabric shifting, whispered conversations tapering off into quiet anticipation. "We are gathered today," the colonel continued, "to recognize outstanding attorneys who have provided exceptional service to the Department of Defense and our armed forces. These legal professionals have demonstrated extraordinary dedication, skill, and commitment to ensuring justice within our military community." He went on to outline the history of the award, the rigorous selection process, the criteria that nominees had to meet. His voice was professional and warm, clearly someone comfortable with public speaking, someone who had presided over dozens of similar ceremonies. But I barely heard his words. I was too aware of the eyes on me, of the weight of recognition that had settled onto my shoulders the moment General Thornton had called me by my rank. The rear admiral sitting next to me leaned over slightly and said in a low voice, "Good to see you, Admiral Hayes. Read the briefing on your recent operation in the South China Sea. Impressive work." I thanked him quietly, trying not to draw more attention, but it was impossible. The officers around me knew who I was, knew what I did, and to them my presence here was not unusual or unexpected. To them I belonged exactly where I was sitting. Behind me, 4 rows back, my family sat in a very different reality. I could not see them without turning around completely, but I could imagine their faces, could picture the confusion and shock that must still be written across their features. My mother, who had thought I was doing what exactly? Something minor, something forgettable, something that did not warrant questions or interest. My father, who had never asked what I did for a living in all these years, who had simply accepted my vague statements about being in the Navy, without curiosity about what that actually meant. Jason, who had mocked me, who had laughed about me not lasting a week, who had been so certain of my inadequacy that he had never bothered to check whether his assumptions were true. The colonel at the podium was introducing the first recipient, now a lawyer who had worked on veterans' benefits cases. The man walked onto the stage to polite applause, accepted his award, made a brief speech thanking his colleagues and family. It was all very standard, very predictable. I clapped along with everyone else, maintaining the appropriate level of attention and respect, but my mind was elsewhere. I thought about the years I had spent trying to earn my family's love through achievement, not understanding that the problem was never about what I achieved, but about whether they were willing to see it. I thought about the loneliness of those years eating Thanksgiving dinner alone on a ship thousands of miles from home, because going back to Texas felt more painful than staying away. I thought about the birthdays marked only by generic cards, signed by my entire chain of command, by sailors who barely knew me, but who recognized the significance of the day. I thought about all the times I had told myself that their indifference did not matter, that I had built a life that fulfilled me, that I did not need their validation. And now here I was, validated in the most public way possible, and all I felt was a strange emptiness, because the validation had not come from them. It had come from General Thornton, from my fellow officers, from a room full of strangers who respected rank and achievement, but did not know me, not really. They did not know that I still remembered my mother singing lullabies when I had nightmares as a child. They did not know that my father had once spent an entire Saturday teaching me how to change a tire because he wanted me to be self-sufficient. They did not know that Jason had been my hero. When I was small, the older brother I had looked up to and wanted desperately to impress. The ceremony continued. More attorneys were called up, more awards distributed, more speeches delivered. My hands grew tired from clapping. My back began to ache from sitting so straight, maintaining the posture expected of someone in my position, even though I wore no uniform to mark my role. Around me, other officers shifted occasionally, whispered brief comments to each other, checked watches and phones during the less interesting moments. It was a long ceremony, and despite its importance, there was an element of endurance to it. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably closer to 45 minutes, the colonel announced, "And now for our final honoree of the morning. This year's Outstanding Defense Attorney Award goes to Mr. Jason Hayes, who has provided exemplary legal representation in numerous high-profile military cases over the past year." The applause was enthusiastic. Jason stood from his seat 4 rows behind me, and I heard the rustle of fabric as my family stood with him, as Amanda leaned in to kiss his cheek as my parents beamed with pride. He walked past my row, and for a fraction of a second, our eyes met. His face was still pale, still marked by that shock, but there was something else there now, too. Shame. Deep, undeniable shame. He climbed the steps to the stage, and General Thornton stood from his own seat in the front row to join him there. The general shook Jason's hand, presented him with a plaque and a certificate, and stepped back to allow Jason to approach the microphone. This was the moment my family had been anticipating, had been planning for, had traveled here to witness. This was Jason's triumph, his recognition, his validation that he was indeed as successful and important as he had always believed himself to be. But something was wrong. Jason gripped the sides of the podium, his hands white-knuckled with tension. He looked out at the audience, opened his mouth to speak, and no sound came out. He tried again, managing to say, I am honored to receive this award." His voice cracked on the word honored. He paused, swallowed hard, looked down at his notes. The audience waited patiently, assuming he was simply overcome with emotion. But I knew better. From where I sat, I could see his hands shaking, could see the way his jaw clenched as he fought for composure. He was not overcome with joy or pride. He was overwhelmed by the sudden crushing realization of his own blindness, his own cruelty, his own failure to see what had been right in front of him all along. I want to thank, he tried again, his voice slightly steadier now, my colleagues who have worked alongside me on these cases. I want to thank the military legal community for this recognition. He paused again, and this time when he looked up from his notes, he was looking directly at me. And I want to thank my family who have always supported me. The lie hung in the air between us. His family had always supported him, yes. But had he supported his family? Had he supported me? We both knew the answer. And in that moment, with hundreds of people watching, with his greatest professional triumph unfolding before him, he could not escape that truth. He stumbled through the rest of his speech, hitting the major points he had clearly practiced, but without any of the confidence or charisma I knew he possessed. He thanked the right people, said the appropriate things, managed to get through it without any major disasters. But it was not the performance he had envisioned. When he finished and stepped away from the microphone, the applause was respectful but not overwhelming. He had failed to capitalize on his moment, had let it slip away because he could not focus. Could not stop thinking about his sister sitting in the front row, wearing a rank he had not known existed in her life. As Jason returned to his seat, General Thornton took the podium one final time. "Before we conclude this morning's ceremony," he said, "I want to take a moment to acknowledge a special guest. Admiral Isabella Hayes of the United States Navy is with us today, attending as family to one of our recipients. Admiral Hayes currently serves as commander of Carrier Strike Group 3, overseeing operations throughout the Pacific Theater." He gestured toward me, and the entire room turned to look. Admiral Hayes has distinguished herself through multiple combat deployments, has received the Bronze Star for valor, and has been instrumental in maintaining security and stability in some of the most challenging maritime regions in the world. She is one of the youngest officers to achieve the rank of admiral in recent history, and her service exemplifies the very best of our naval tradition. The applause this time was different. It was not polite or perfunctory. It was genuine, enthusiastic, the kind of recognition that military communities reserve for those who have truly earned their respect. Officers stood to clap. Even civilians who might not fully understand the significance of my rank or role understood from the general's tone that they were in the presence of someone exceptional. I stood as protocol required, acknowledging the applause, with a brief nod and a small smile. This did not want to overshadow Jason on what was supposed to be his day. But I also could not deny what was happening, could not shrink back down into invisibility just to make my family comfortable. I had spent too many years making myself smaller for their convenience. Not anymore. When the applause finally died down and I sat back in my seat, General Thornton concluded the ceremony with standard remarks about the importance of the legal profession within the military, about the honor of service, about gratitude for all who attended. Then he dismissed the gathering, and people began to stand to stretch, to mill about talking and greeting friends and colleagues. I stood as well, intending to slip quietly toward the exit to avoid the confrontation I knew was coming. But before I could take 2 steps, I was surrounded by officers wanting to shake my hand to thank me for my service, to ask questions about current operations in the Pacific. These were my peers, my community, and in their company, I felt the ease that came from being understood and valued for exactly who I was. And somewhere in the crowd behind me, my family stood watching, finally understanding that the daughter and sister they had dismissed for so long was someone they had never really known at all. I saw them coming through the crowd, moving toward me with the determination of people who could no longer avoid a confrontation. General Thornton and the other senior officers had graciously given me space after a few minutes of conversation, understanding without being told that I needed to handle a personal matter. Now it was just me standing near the side exit of the auditorium, and my family approaching with faces that showed 100 different emotions. My father reached me first. He stopped a few feet away, and I watched him struggle with what to say, his mouth opening and closing like he was testing out words before actually speaking them. Finally, he managed, "Isabella, you are, you are an admiral." His voice carried such profound confusion that under different circumstances, it might have been funny. "Yes, Dad. I am an admiral. I have been in the Navy for 15 years. I thought you knew. But you never—" He stopped, shook his head. "You never told us. You never said anything about this." He gestured vaguely at me, at the room, at the officers who were still watching us with curious eyes. My mother reached us then, and she was crying openly, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face, mascara leaving dark trails down her cheeks. "Sweetheart, I do not understand. How could you not tell us? This is so you are so, why did not you say anything?" The question hung in the air, and I felt a surge of anger so intense, it surprised me. How could I not tell them? As if the failure of communication had been mine, as if I had hidden this truth rather than them, simply never bothering to ask, never caring enough to inquire about my life beyond the most superficial pleasantries. "I tried to tell you," I said, and my voice was remarkably steady considering the storm of emotions inside me. "For years I tried. Do you remember when I called to tell you I had been promoted to lieutenant, Mom? You were on the phone for maybe 30 seconds before you had to go plan Jason's birthday party. Do you remember when I sent an email about deploying to Afghanistan?" Nobody responded. Not one person in this family sent me a single message to say be safe or we are thinking of you, or even just good luck. My father's face went even paler. We did not know it was important. You did not know serving in a war zone was important. You did not think maybe your daughter being deployed to active combat might warrant some attention." I could hear my voice rising, and I forced it back down, aware of the audience we still had, aware that this was neither the time nor the place for a complete breakdown of decades of family dysfunction. Jason and Amanda had reached us now. Amanda hung back clearly, wanting no part of this conversation. But Jason stepped forward. For the first time in my memory, my older brother looked uncertain, looked smaller somehow. "Bella," he started using the childhood nickname he had not called me in probably 20 years. "I am so sorry. I never thought, I just assumed." "You assumed I was a failure," I finished for him. "You assumed that because I was not successful in the same ways you were successful, in the same ways Mom and Dad could understand and quantify and show off to their friends, that I must not be successful at all. You assumed that your achievements were the only achievements that mattered." "That is not fair," he said, but his protest was weak, unconvincing even to himself. "Is not it yesterday at the gate you said I was not even on the list? You laughed about it. You told the guard I was just tagging along, not important enough to be a real guest. Do you remember that?" His face flushed red. "I did not, I was joking." "Were you?" "Because it did not feel like a joke. It felt like how you have always seen me. As someone who exists on the periphery of your life, someone who is not worth consideration or respect unless I conform to your understanding of what success looks like." My mother was sobbing harder now. "We love you. You have to know we love you." I looked at her, at this woman who had raised me, who had bandaged my scraped knees and helped me with homework and taught me how to cook her famous pot roast. I did love her. I loved all of them, despite everything. But love without attention, without interest, without any effort to actually know the person you claim to love, was that really love at all? I do not doubt that you love some version of me, I said quietly. But you love the idea of who you thought I was, not who I actually am. For 15 years, I have been serving this country. I have been in combat zones. I have made decisions that affected the lives of thousands of sailors under my command. I have received medals and commendations. I have been promoted repeatedly because of my performance and dedication. And not once did any of you ask me about my work with genuine curiosity. Not once did you celebrate my achievements the way you celebrated every single thing Jason did. We did not know, my father said again, as if repetition could make the excuse valid. You did not know because you did not ask. There is a difference between not knowing and not caring to know. I sent emails, I called, I sent photos. Remember when I sent that picture of me receiving a commendation? Mom, you looked at it for 5 seconds and said, "That is nice," and then immediately started talking about Jason's new car. Do you have any idea how that felt? To realize that even my accomplishments, when presented directly to you, could not hold your attention for more than a moment before the conversation returned to your favorite topic. Jason was staring at his shoes now. Amanda had actually taken several steps back, trying to physically distance herself from this confrontation. My father looked like he wanted to argue, but could not find the words. And my mother just kept crying, kept saying, "I am sorry," over and over like a mantra that might somehow undo years of neglect. When I was 29, I continued, and I could feel my own composure starting to crack. I was in Afghanistan providing security for a diplomatic convoy. We were ambushed. There was an explosion. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital in Germany with broken ribs, a concussion, and shrapnel in my side. I spent 3 months in recovery, 3 months of physical therapy, of nightmares, of wondering if I would ever feel whole again. And I did not call you. Do you know why I did not call you? They were all staring at me now, even Amanda, all of them frozen by the rawness in my voice. I did not call because I knew you would not care. Not really. Oh, you might have said the right words, might have expressed appropriate concern, but within 5 minutes the conversation would have shifted to whatever Jason was doing, whatever milestone or achievement or mundane detail of his life you found more interesting than your daughter almost dying. That is not true, my mother gasped. Is not it? Then tell me, Mom. Tell me one thing I have done in the last 15 years that you remember without me reminding you. Tell me one achievement of mine, that you celebrated one struggle of mine, that you helped me through one conversation where you asked about my life and actually listened to the answer. The silence that followed was answer enough. My mother opened her mouth several times, but nothing came out. My father looked away. Jason at least had the decency to meet my eyes, and in his gaze I saw the full weight of his realization settling onto his shoulders. I am not angry that you did not know I was an admiral, I said finally, my voice tired, now drained of the sharp edge it had carried moments before. I am angry that you did not care when I was just Isabella, just your daughter and sister, who was trying to make something of her life. You only care now because other people care. Because General Thornton saluted me, because officers are treating me with respect, because my rank impresses you. But you should have cared about me when I had no rank at all, when I was just a 19-year-old girl trying to make you proud. We are proud, my father said, but the words sounded hollow. Are you proud of me, or are you proud of my rank? If I walked away from the Navy tomorrow, if I became a school teacher or a librarian or anything else that did not come with medals and ceremonies and impressive titles, would you be proud of me then? None of them answered. They did not have to. We all knew the truth. I looked at Jason, at my brother, who had once been my hero, and I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. Do you remember teaching me to ride a bike? I was 6 years old, and I was so scared of falling. But you ran behind me holding the seat, promising you would not let go until I was ready. And when I finally got my balance and you did let go, you cheered so loud that the whole neighborhood could hear. That is the brother I needed. That is the brother I have been looking for in you for years. But somewhere along the way you decided I was competition instead of family, and you have treated me accordingly ever since. Jason's eyes were wet now. Bella, I do not know what to say. There is nothing to say right now. You all need to think about what kind of family you want to be, and I need space to figure out if I can forgive all the years of feeling invisible in my own family. My mother reached out as if to touch my arm, then pulled back uncertain. Please do not shut us out. Please give us a chance to make this right. I am not shutting you out, but I am not going to pretend anymore that everything is fine. It is not fine. It has not been fine for a very long time. And if we are going to rebuild any kind of relationship, it has to be based on honesty. Not on me shrinking myself down to make you comfortable or on you only paying attention to me when it serves your purposes. I stepped back, creating physical space to match the emotional distance I was setting. I am going to leave now. I have a flight back to Hawaii this evening. You have my email address, you have my phone number. If you want to really try to know who I am and to build something real, then reach out. But understand that I am not the problem here. I have never been the problem. The problem is that you decided long ago that Jason's story was the only story worth paying attention to, and you missed out on mine entirely. With that, I turned and walked toward the exit. Every step felt heavy, weighted with years of disappointment and hurt. But there was also something else, something lighter, relief maybe, or freedom. The freedom that came from finally saying what I had needed to say for so long, from refusing to accept being treated as less than I was, from choosing myself, even when it meant walking away from the people I loved. Behind me, I heard my mother sob, heard my father say something I could not quite make out, but I did not turn back. I kept walking out of the auditorium into the bright Texas sunlight toward whatever came next. I sat in my hotel room that evening, my flight to Hawaii not leaving for another 3 hours, and allowed myself to feel everything I had been holding back during the confrontation with my family. The anger, yes, but also the grief. Grief for the relationships we had never had, for the family we could have been if they had just looked a little closer, cared a little more. My phone had been buzzing intermittently since I left the base. Text messages from my mother, emails from my father, missed calls from Jason. I had not looked at any of them yet. I needed time to process what had happened, to understand my own feelings before I engaged with theirs. When I finally did open the messages, I found exactly what I expected. Apologies, explanations, pleas for forgiveness. My mother's texts were emotional, full of declarations of love and regret. My father's email was more measured, but no less apologetic, acknowledging that they had failed me in fundamental ways. And Jason's messages, all 6 of them, showed a progression from shock to understanding to genuine remorse. The last one, sent just an hour ago, was the most honest. Bella, I have spent the afternoon reading about your career. I found articles about operations you led, interviews you gave, commendations you received. You are right. We never knew you at all. And that is entirely our fault. I am not asking for forgiveness right now because I know we do not deserve it. But I want you to know that I see you now. Really see you. And I am ashamed of the brother I have been. You deserved so much better from all of us. I sat with that message for a long time, reading it over and over. It was what I had needed to hear, but it also was not enough. Words were easy, change was hard, and I had spent too many years hoping for change that never came to trust promises made in the immediate aftermath of a revelation. But I also was not someone who held grudges or burned bridges unnecessarily. I believed in second chances, in the possibility of growth and redemption. I just needed time to decide if I was willing to extend that chance and what boundaries I would need to set to protect myself if I did. The next morning, on my flight back across the Pacific, I drafted an email to my family. I wrote it carefully, weighing every word, trying to be honest without being unnecessarily cruel. I received your messages, I wrote. I appreciate the apologies, and I believe they are sincere. But apologies are just the beginning. If you truly want to rebuild our relationship, it cannot be based on my rank or my achievements. It has to be based on mutual respect and genuine interest in each other's lives. I need you to see me as Isabella, not as Admiral Hayes. I need you to care about me when I am not doing anything impressive, when I am just living my life, making mistakes, being human. Can you do that? Because if you cannot, then we do not have a foundation to build on. I sent it before I could second guess myself, then put my phone away and tried to sleep. When I woke hours later as we began our descent into Honolulu, I had responses from all three of them. Short messages, this time not trying to fix everything at once, just acknowledging what I had said. Yes, my mother wrote. We can do that. We want to do that. My father's reply was similar, and Jason simply said, I will prove it to you, however long it takes. Over the following months, they did try. My mother started emailing me regularly, not just when there was family news to share, but to ask how I was, what I was reading, whether I was sleeping enough. My father sent articles he thought I might find interesting about naval history, about leadership, about topics that had nothing to do with my career, but everything to do with who I was as a person. And Jason, my brother, who had dismissed me for so long, began calling once a week just to talk, to hear about my day, to share stories from his own life that were not about achievements, but about struggles and fears, and the ordinary moments that make up a human existence. It was not perfect. Old habits died hard, and there were still moments when conversations defaulted to superficial topics, or when I felt the old patterns trying to reassert themselves. But there was effort, genuine effort, and that mattered more than I had expected it to. 6 months after that ceremony in San Antonio, I got leave to visit home. I was nervous during the entire flight, uncertain what I would find, whether the progress we had made over email and phone calls would translate into actual change dynamics in person. But when I arrived, my father picked me up at the airport alone, just the two of us, and during the drive home he said, Tell me about your work. Really tell me. I want to understand what you do, what it means to you, why you chose this path. So I told him, and he listened, really listened, asking questions, showing genuine interest, seeing me perhaps for the first time in decades. We talked all the way home and into the evening, sitting on the back porch, while my mother cooked dinner inside, and when we finally stopped talking, he had tears in his eyes. I am so sorry I missed so much, he said. I am so sorry I let you feel like you did not matter. You do matter. You always did. That week at home was different from any visit before it. Jason came over every day, and for the first time in our adult lives, we talked as equals rather than as superior and inferior. He asked about my deployments, my challenges, my hopes for the future. He also talked about his own insecurities, his own struggles, admitting that part of why he had dismissed me for so long was because he was afraid of being compared to me, afraid that if our parents saw how extraordinary I was, they might find him lacking. It was a revelation, understanding that his behavior had come from fear rather than malice. It did not excuse what he had done, but it made it more human, more understandable. We were both children of parents who had communicated love through achievement and success, and we had both been damaged by that dynamic in different ways. On my last night before flying back to Hawaii, the whole family gathered for dinner. It was just us, no extended family, no distractions. And at one point, my mother raised her glass and said, To Isabella, to our daughter, our sister, who has shown more strength and grace than we deserved. We are proud of you not because of your rank, but because of who you are. We clinked glasses, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of forgiveness. The understanding that people could change, that families could heal, that it was not too late to build something real and meaningful even after years of getting it wrong. As I flew back to my ship the next day, I thought about the journey I had been on, both the physical journey across oceans and continents, and the emotional journey from invisibility to recognition. I thought about that moment in the auditorium when General Thornton had saluted me when my family's understanding of who I was had been shattered in a single instant. It would have been easy to feel vindicated, to bask in their shock and discomfort, to use their ignorance as a weapon against them. But that was not who I was. I was not someone who sought revenge or who found satisfaction in others' pain. I was someone who had learned through years of military service that leadership meant being bigger than the moment, that strength meant choosing grace even when anger would be easier, That true victory was not about defeating your enemies, but about building something better than what existed before. My family had failed me. That was true and undeniable. But they were also trying to do better. And that effort deserved recognition. Not blind forgiveness, not pretending the past had not happened, but acknowledgement that change was possible and that relationships could be rebuilt with intention and work. I still carried the scars of those years of feeling invisible. Probably I always would. There would always be a part of me that remembered standing in that aisle, without a seat, listening to my brother laugh about how I was not even on the list. But alongside that memory, I now had others. My mother's tearful apology, my father's genuine interest, Jason's humble admission of his own faults. These new memories did not erase the old ones, but they added dimension and complexity to a story that had felt one-sided for so long. I had learned the truth that had taken me 15 years to fully understand, was that you cannot control how others see you or value you. You can only control how you see and value yourself. I had spent so many years trying to earn my family's approval that I had nearly lost sight of the fact that I did not need their approval to be valuable, to be successful, to matter. I was an admiral not because they recognized it, but because I had worked for it, earned it, deserved it. Their recognition was nice, yes, but it was not the source of my worth. That came from within, from my own knowledge of what I had accomplished and who I had become. And maybe that was the real lesson of that day in San Antonio. Not that my family had finally seen me, though, that mattered, but that I had finally seen myself clearly, had finally understood that I did not need to shrink or hide or apologize for being who I was. I was Admiral Isabella Hayes. I was a leader, a naval officer, someone who had dedicated her life to something larger than herself. And whether my family understood that or not, whether they celebrated it or not, it was still true. The sun was setting over the Pacific as I arrived back at my ship, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. My crew greeted me as I came aboard, salutes and smiles and welcome backs. These were my people, the ones who depended on me, who trusted me, who saw me every day not as someone's sister or daughter, but as their commander. This was my home, my purpose, my place in the world. I stood on the deck for a long time that evening, watching the water and thinking about everything that had happened. About the girl I had been desperate for approval. About the woman I had become strong enough to demand respect. About the possibility of reconciliation with a family that had finally opened their eyes. In the end, what I had learned was simple but profound. You cannot force people to see you, but you can choose to see yourself, to value yourself, to build a life that matters regardless of who is watching. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, the people you love will wake up one day and realize what they have been missing. They will see you standing there exactly where you have always been, and they will finally understand what you have known all along, that you were worth seeing all along. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you ever had to fight for recognition from the people who should have given it freely? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their worth is not determined by others' ability to see it. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you are valuable exactly as you are, whether anyone else recognizes it or not. Until next time, take care of yourselves and know that you matter.